Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, taking a look at another 2023 NFL mock draft for the Seattle Seahawks. Post-free agency signings, obviously Bobby Wagner last night coming back to Seattle. And I'm a massive fan of what Seattle's doing in free agency. They're taking a look at what are some glaring positions of need that we have. We're going to address that in free agency. You obviously get an all-pro linebacker in Bobby Wagner. Devin Bush, I'm a fan of as well. So that linebacker room looking pretty good. But Seattle, what they're doing is they've kind of positioned themselves in which a draft they have the number 5 overall pick and the 20th pick to kind of just take the best players on their board. They don't have a massive glaring position of need that they need to address. I think a lot of teams kind of wait until the draft to address some of those positions of need. That kind of doesn't allow them to take the best players on the board. So Seattle in a very, very good spot heading into the 2023 NFL mock draft. Before we get into it, though, I just want to say thank you to you guys, especially the Seahawks fans. You guys have shown a ton of support. This is the third Seattle Seahawks mock draft we've done. Taking a look at some of the comments that you guys had from the last two. A lot of insightful feedback. I appreciate it so much. That's what draft season is about. All the support you guys have shown means a lot. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Then let me know in the comment section how you think this draft went. Let's get into the draft here. So this is how I think the first 4 picks go, right? Panthers, Texans, Colts, all locks to take quarterbacks. And you might even see the Cardinals trade out of that third overall pick for a team that wants a quarterback. And this one, they have him sticking and getting Will Anderson. That means Jalen Carter's on the board. And as the day goes by, like Jalen Carter or Will Anderson will be available for Seattle. And I think it's an absolute lock to pick one of those two. Jalen Carter, we can talk a little bit about the concerns you have. Obviously, the off-the-field stuff came in really out of shape for his Georgia Pro Day. From a pure film standpoint, there's not a more dominant player in football than we saw than Jalen Carter, especially when it comes to interior defensive linemen. We've seen guys like Chris Jones, Fletcher Cox for Philly. The impact that a very elite interior defensive lineman can have on a defense, not only in terms of stopping the run, but also getting after the passer, is massive. And my selling point for Jalen Carter is even if he reaches 80% of his potential, I still think he's an all-pro interior defensive lineman. And imagine if you can get him in a spot where he's kind of locked in under Pete Carroll. It's a strong locker room culture. I think Jalen Carter in that pick makes too much sense. Tyree Wilson's another interesting guy to take a look at, but the pure ceiling for Jalen Carter is just way too high to pass up. I think you rush that pick in at number 5. Number 20, it gets a little bit more interesting. Last mock, we went with Nolan Smith here at 20. Nolan Smith goes off the board at 19 to Tampa. Taking a look at some of the guys on the board, Brian Brazee, like you talk about 2 high upside guys, doubling up on the interior defensive line. I think that would make a lot of sense. Zay Flowers being here at 20 in my mind also. And that was one of the things you guys said is you would like the wide receiver position to be addressed a little bit later in the draft. If Zay Flowers is here, a guy who ran a 4.4 40, he creates separation so quickly in his route trees. I think Geno Smith would absolutely love a guy like Zay Flowers. And especially you look at who kind of are the projected wide receivers. You feel good about Lockett and DK Metcalf. You don't feel very good about your wide receiver 3. I mean, right now, Dwayne Eskridge, that was a wild pick a couple years ago. Zay Flowers is a bona fide wide receiver. I really like him. I know a lot of the fans might not like wide receiver at 20, but I think how good Seattle's done in free agency, I think you're kind of allowed to go get a player like Zay Flowers, who's a top 20 guy on my board. I still do think it's a position of need. And then you start addressing that offensive line in day 2. Zay Flowers would be my pick. He was so productive at Boston College in such a horrible offense. I think he fits what Seattle's trying to do really, really well. Pick 37. I would like to address the interior defensive line. Felix Anudike-Uzomah is sitting there. That would be a really nice pick. I would not argue with that pick at all. Let's take a look at who's on the board in the interior offensive line spot. Steve Avila, Luke Weipler, both really good. John Michael Schmitz. Looking at this right now, I think I might be betting that one of those guys will be available at 52. And I'm going to go get, again, we talked about they've put themselves in a spot where they can go get the best player available. Felix Anudike-Uzomah, he's an apex predator out there, especially off the edge. He's really good against the run, but he's phenomenal at going right through tackles. He's got the quick twitch to beat tackles on the outside as well. Passing on a guy like Nolan Smith at 20, I think Felix Anudike-Uzomah coming out of Kansas State would make a lot of sense. And you look at one of the biggest concerns Seattle has heading into 2023, that defensive line. You just added two guys who are extremely talented up front, one on the interior, one as kind of an edge pass rusher. And he's played a lot of different positions. He can play kind of inside. They played that 3-3-5. I think that pick would make a lot of sense. Pick 52. I would have been all over Dion Henley here. I really like him, but I like that they addressed the linebacker position in free agency. Quite frankly, this linebacker class is not great. I think you have a guy like Trent Simpson who's super athletic, but you have a lot of question marks about the film. You saw Steve Avila is off the board here. John Michael Schmitz also off the board. That's tough. I think you got to go with Luke Weipler here at that center position. We kind of took a gamble here and hoping that John Michael Schmitz or Steve Avila was going to fall. They didn't. I think Luke Weipler is easily the next best player on this board. I think you need help at that center spot. Luke Weipler is kind of a plug-and-play guy. Another guy I really like is Olu. If you want to address that center spot later in this draft, Oluwatimi from Michigan is another guy that's kind of a plug-and-play center there. Luke Weipler, I think, is a guy that could probably play guard as well, but I think that's where you're going there. That's unfortunate that Steve Avila and John Michael Schmitz go before that 52nd pick, because that's who I would be targeting for sure. Pick 83. Now you're getting to, again, I think you kind of stay in that best player available mode. I think there's a lot of good players. I really like, obviously, Tariq Woolen coming out last year was phenomenal. Kobe Bryant, I'm still high on. There's some cornerbacks that I still would be looking at, right? If a guy like Eli Ricks, let's take a look at who's available at that cornerback position. This is, in my opinion, the sweet spot to grab a cornerback. Guy like Garrett Williams, I really like Hodges Tomlinson from TCU. Really interesting prospect because he's a little shorter, all right? He's only 5'9", 180 pounds, but he played on that boundary a lot, and he was damn good at it, going up against some really good Big 12 wide receivers at 34.6% completion rate, 42.5 passer rating when targeted. Extremely sticky, and he's an extreme competitor, right? When you're a little bit smaller, taking a look at what he measured in at 5'8", 180, like, you have to be a gamer. I think Hodges Tomlinson is an absolute gamer coming out of TCU, and he's going to fall a little bit because he doesn't have the size that guys like Joey Porter Jr., Eli Ricks has. I think you take a very good football player late in round 3. I think that pick would make a lot of sense. He's good. And again, you set yourself up for let's get best player available. And I think we addressed like edge, defensive line, wide receiver. Those are some of the concerns I had. We also get the interior offensive line. Now you're kind of in a spot where let's just go pick really, really good football players. Carl Brooks would have been a nice pick there too. Taking a look, Keandre Coburn. You get a guy like Jalen Carter who's a force, but more of a pass rusher. Keandre Coburn would be a very nice addition on the inside in terms of a run stopper. This dude is 6'2", 335 pounds, legit a fire hydrant. I really like his game. Oluwatimi, again, if you passed on Luke Weipler early, I think Olu would have been a phenomenal pick there. Bryce Ford Wheaton's another guy that I really like. Owen Popo's a guy I like. I think we're going to go get Keandre Coburn, though. I think for what he does, he's really good at it and doesn't get enough credit for rushing the passer as well. But you talk about getting a guy who's going to be a two-gapper, who's going to allow those good linebackers, Devin Bush, Bobby Wagner, to play free. I think Keandre Coburn's a phenomenal pick. And you really can't have enough depth on the defensive line, but gets after the passer well too. 24 hurries, a 15.4 pass rush win rate. He's also phenomenal in the run. Again, this dude built like a fire hydrant, 6'2", 332 pounds, plays with phenomenal leverage as well. Yeah, I mean, we're addressing the defensive line, but there's a lot of good defensive linemen to be had, and that's probably, when you look at the depth chart here, that's the position that you want to address the most. Pick 51, I don't have a position that I want to address as much as let's just take a look at who's available. I think Chandler Zavala from NC State's a really interesting target as well. I think he can play guard. I think he can play center. But Antonio Mafi too. Man, we've been taking Antonio Mafi so much, and he's just such a raw dude. But what you're looking at here is I would argue here is Chandler Zavala is more of like he's going to be able to start right away. You're going to feel good about it. Antonio Mafi, he might need a year. I don't know if he's going to be a guy that's being phenomenal year one because he's coming over from the defensive line, but he is such a force in the run game. Super powerful guy coming over from the defensive side of the ball. Heavy hands, really strong legs. I would like that pick a lot for Seattle. And then 154 right away. Yeah, Diaby coming off the edge would be a nice get. Taking a look at maybe just positions that you want to. I feel really good about this team. That I think you're sticking to best player available. I think you could add a running back here, quite frankly. I think Kenneth Walker is good. He's your bell cow, but maybe adding a pass catching running back because you lost a guy like Travis Homer, you lost a guy like Rashad Penny. I would love Eric Gray here. I think Eric Gray would make a lot of sense, especially doing kind of what Kenneth Walker was not as good of. I don't think Kenneth Walker can't catch the ball. I don't think Michigan State asked him to do much, but Eric Gray, for one, he's a top 5 running back on my board. I don't know why PFF doesn't value him like that. In terms of elusive running, he is top notch. Making second level defenders miss and miss clean is big. And again, 34 catches on 40 targets. He's a very productive pass catcher as well. So he kind of balances out what Kenneth Walker does. And you don't want to have DJ Dallas as your running back too. I think I'm a fan of what they did. Why don't go back and resign Rashad Penny? Don't go. This running back class is so deep and so good. Just go draft another rookie running back, get him on the rookie deal. I think Eric Gray would make a lot of sense there. Pick 198, Quindell Johnson. I like him a lot. Drew Scruggs from Penn State. Dylan Horton. Dylan Horton would be a really nice addition in the sense that he's just going to play everywhere for you. He can play kind of that 3 tech. I think he's big enough. He can also rush the passer. This dude has a motor. Like he's not the fastest. He's not the strongest. He's not the twitchiest. He's not the biggest. But this dude, you take a look at what he did. I mean, 34 pressures, I believe, 35 pressures in 2022. Obviously, as a Michigan fan, I saw it firsthand. This guy he's a wrecking ball. He plays the game extremely hard. Over 10 sacks this year, and a lot of them were just hustle sacks. He's kind of a type of guy that I would like adding late in this draft, especially on the defensive line where you just want to add some depth there. Man, McClennan Curtis would be a really nice pick here. I want to see who's available on that interior defense, or just maybe a swing tackle, add another body on the trenches. I think this depth chart is a damn good depth chart. I think opposite of the defensive line and the offensive line. So I'm taking a look at who is available. TJ Bass, phenomenal. Do we have Alex Forsythe still on the board? I would really like that. Would really like Ricky Stroenberg, Alex Forsythe. You already got Luke Weipler, so maybe you don't need to take Alex Forsythe, but he's a guy that's going to come in. He's played a lot for Oregon. I don't know if he can play guard. That's kind of what you're concerned about. We already got Antonio Mafi too, so you're feeling pretty good. Justin Short is a really interesting pick at that wide receiver position too. I'm not going to say he's DK Metcalf, but he's really big and he's really fast. He's just a little bit raw. Drake Thomas, and Carlton Marshall. He is the leader in FBS tackles, career wise. He's over 500 tackles during his career, 50 tackles for a loss. Probably going to be playing special teams. I mean, the biggest thing with Carlton Marshall is he's 5'7" 3/8. Like he's really short, but he is a gamer. He plays the game extremely hard. I think he's worth a shot late, getting another body in that linebacker room. Taking a look how that we get graded out by PFF. Jalen Carter, that's just a solid A pick. I get the arguments, and I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section about it. Jalen Carter, I think, is worth the gamble. I don't even know if it's a little bit of a gamble, but he's also just so good. And you have the ability to arguably pick the best player in this draft at pick 5. I think you fire on that. Zay Flowers is an interesting one. If Zay Flowers wasn't there, there's two wide receivers in this class that I would take for Seattle at 20. Zay Flowers and Jackson Smith-Njigba. If neither of those guys are there, I'm probably going in a different direction. But Zay Flowers being there, a guy that can play on the boundary, but he's also, I see him as more of a slot wide receiver that can create separation extremely quickly, run after the catch. I think that makes a lot of sense. Felix Anudike-Uzomah, again, best player available at a position that you want to address. That was a no-brainer. I wish this went a little differently. I wish we could have gotten like a Steve Avila who can play center, who can play guard, kind of wherever you want to slot him in. You're obviously bringing back a guy like Phil Haynes, who I think might be more of a backup at the next level. Hodges Tomlinson, Keandre Coburn, 2 guys, again, more best player available. So many picks for Seattle, so many avenues where they can just get talent onto this team and build some depth. I really like the opportunity Seattle has to really get a very, very good roster coming out of the 2023 NFL draft. That'll do it again. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.